Good evening, everyone. Melanie Yazzie nisha. Belagana nishle, my day skijni vashichin. Belagana dashichera trotsoni dashanala. Behalge the white cone, then Nasha Akatas Astat Nishle. Welcome, everyone. I'm Melanie Yazzie. My family comes from White Cone Chapter on the western side of the Navajo Nation. I'll be the MC tonight. Hope I do a good job. Woohoo, yeah. We should clap. Not for me. You don't have to clap for me. But I think we should clap for why we're here tonight. Right? We're here because of Larry. Let's clap for Larry. I think there are many people in this room, including many of Larry's relatives from the Casuse family who are here. There are many people from the movement who knew Larry and grew up in the movement with Larry. And there are many people like me. I wasn't alive when Larry was here on Earth. And I'm a part of the Red Nation. I helped to co-found the organization in 2014. We're sponsoring this event tonight, the Red Nation and Red Media. And thank you. The Red Nation, back in the early days, we talked a lot about Larry. We still talk a lot about Larry in the Red Nation. And we know that we would not exist as a force of love for our people, as warriors for our people, for the liberation of our land and our people, if it had not been for Larry. And so I was incredibly honored when David asked me to write the foreword to this book, the book that we're going to be talking about this evening, because this Larry's story means everything to me, because he motivates all of us, even still. And I know 7 generations from now, he's going to still be motivating us to do the right thing, right? To do the right thing for our people, and to have so much love that we're willing to go to remarkable lengths, right? To protect our people and to show that love for our people and for the land. And so I'm incredibly honored, actually, to be here. Gallup is an important place for the story. It's where a lot of the story unfolds. But whatever, Gallup, this is our land. I mean, we can call it Gallup if we want to, but as far as I'm concerned as a Diné person, this is a homecoming, right? And this is where Larry belonged because he's also a Diné person. He's a Diné relative, right? And he's now an ancestor. He's an ancestor in his family, but he's an ancestor in the movement. And so being here, it's like a prayer. It's like a special thing. I think that we're all here tonight to talk about this. And so for me, that's the significance of being in this space. And I don't really think I need to talk much about how violent Gallup is. It continues to be, the Red Nation has tried to do as much as we can through our Border Town Justice campaign. This is one of the first banners we ever made as an organization. We marched on Gallup in 2015. The panhandling ordinances, right? The constant policing and terrorization of people who live on the streets, many of whom are our own relatives. The way in which businesses are incredibly predatory and exploitative towards our relatives in Gallup. Those practices haven't changed since 1974, and they haven't changed since 2015. When the Red Nation descended upon Gallup to pick up the work that Indians Against Exploitation and the Coalition for Navajo Liberation and Kiva Club, right? These organizations that Larry was so important for 40, 50 years ago were doing. And so the struggle is as real today. I'm sure there are many people in Gallup who are not happy that this book has been written, who are not happy that we're gathered here tonight to celebrate a hero of Indigenous liberation.
That's right.
And right? And I'm glad they're not happy. Because, right, their existence, they only exist because of what they extract from us and from our people. Larry knew that truth, and we all know that truth, and this book speaks that truth, I think, really powerfully. And so tonight, at least for the time that we're here, we're going to reclaim this space, right? We're going to reclaim it as Indigenous land. We're going to reclaim it for the movement for liberation and our love for Mother Earth. So that's my pledge tonight for all of us. Before we get started, I wanted to thank, there's like a lot of people I need to thank. I want to thank Knifewing and his family for this space. Was it 2017 that Native Liberation was here? Help me, 2017. So one of the Red Nation's first large gatherings happened right here in this space. We outgrew the space by the next year, so we had to move across the street to the conference center. And so the conference has grown every year since then, except of course during the pandemic when we couldn't hold conferences in person. But this space was one of the first places where Red Nation really made its mark in Gallup. And so this is also an incredibly important space. And we just really appreciate Knifewing for all the support he's given all these years to activists, right? And the freedom fighters of the Indigenous liberation struggle. I want to thank Larry's family. We have two of his sisters up here. We have many of his family members in the audience. Thank you for being here. We had a similar event in Albuquerque last night at the Red Nation office, which is actually called the Larry Casuse Freedom Center. It's on Central, pretty close to the University of New Mexico campus. And many of the family members spoke, and it was incredibly powerful. If you didn't catch it, we'll have a podcast of it. And we can also do more of that tonight if you feel so moved. I'm not trying to tell you you need to talk. You don't want to talk. But we're just incredibly honored that you're here and that you have these stories and that you remind us, right, that Larry was someone who loved his people. He was a gentle, intelligent, kind person. And really, like the true warriors are always that. They're not people who have fear in their heart. They're not really people who have violence in their heart, right? And that's the prayer that Larry carried. And this is what we always try to emulate when we're out doing the work as a Red Nation, asking ourselves always, right, what would Larry do? So thank you so much, all of you, for being here, Larry's family. I want to thank everyone who is also here, who's been part of the movement for a really long time, right? We also owe our existence as the Red Nation, and actually Indigenous people in general, in a place like the United States, owe our existence to the freedom fighters who refused to give up in past generations as the only reason why we're here, right? Because of the strength and just the incredible tenacity and commitment of our ancestors, right? To maintaining who we are as Indigenous people. And everyone who does this work, you don't have to be part of AIM, you don't have to be in the Red Nation. You don't have to necessarily be out on the streets protesting, but people who do language preservation work, right? People who plant the seeds of our people and grow corn. We're all part of this larger movement for life and this larger movement for Indigenous liberation. And so I also want to dedicate this event tonight to all of you because you're the ones doing the work. And because of that, I really believe that our people will still be here, between the 4 sacred mountains 7 generations from now. And I believe Larry thought that too. And that's why he struggled so hard. So I want to thank everyone here who's doing that movement work and that important work. Who else? Okay, Barry. I want to thank Barry Koppler for getting us the space. Barry's actually been an incredible ally with the work we've done over the past 8 years in Gallup, and just incredibly grateful. And if you wanted to talk about these, maybe later on after we speak, the 2 images that frame the table here, that would be wonderful. But thank you so much, Barry, for securing this space. One more? Okay, one more. 2 more people I want to thank. Justine Tiba, right here, who's filming us, and Kylie Guy, who's right back at that table. You give them a round of applause. They organized the whole thing. I just wrote the forward and flew in for the weekend, okay? I did not organize. I organized a lot of stuff for the Red Nation, but I did not organize this event. They worked so hard. And the Red Nation is an organization that's led by women, okay? It's led by fierce, badass Indigenous women. And these 2 right here are fierce, badass Indigenous women who deserve our respect and our recognition for how hard they work for the people. So I just wanted to give you guys special recognition. And you can introduce yourself if you want to, but you don't have to. I don't need to call you out. All right, couple more housekeeping things. This is super long-winded, but I had a lot to say. So this event is sponsored by Red Media and the Red Nation. If you want to know more about the Red Nation, we have some literature back there. If you're interested in getting involved in the Red Nation, you can talk to any of us and give us your information. We'll put you on the listserv for when we have meetings and events. If you didn't see the books back there already, we have 3 books for sale. We have this book for sale, and we have the People's Discount tonight. You're never going to find this book for $13 anywhere. So we're we're not gonna make our people pay $25 for this book. So we slashed it. We sold out all of the stock we had for the flea market this afternoon. So I'm just letting you know, at this price, they're gonna go real fast. So I'm seriously though, they went way fast. So yes, Justine?
You mentioned the mailing.
Mailing, sure. So this is $13. We're also selling the Red Deal, which is a book that about 20 people, community members and Red Nation members, all Indigenous people co-authored. It's a vision for how we decolonize. It's a vision for how we make it through climate change from an Indigenous perspective. So if you're interested in reading that, that's back there. It's $7. It's normally twice that much. And then we have Red Nation Rising, which David, myself, Dr. Jennifer where's Jennifer? Dr. Jennifer Denetdale, and Nick Estes is another Red Nation comrade of mine. We co-authored. And a lot of what we write about in that book is based on our experience organizing in places, in border towns like Gallup. And that book is $8 tonight. So you can pay in cash, you can pay with a card, we can take whatever. So those are for sale back there. But seriously, this book, get it, because it's gonna go fast. And we don't have enough copies because we forgot our extra box of books, sorry. Okay, if you're interested in donating to the Red Nation, we have a donation slot back here too. It just helps us do the work that we do. We get to pick it back up. Now, pandemic isn't over, but like people can come back together, perhaps a bit more safely as long as we're masked, to continue to do the work on the ground. There's free swag back there too. Take as much as you want. We're not stingy. We'll replenish it if you take like 80 pens, that's totally fine. Again, this is for the people. Everything we do is for the people. And I think that's it. There's no food. I apologize. That's our bad Indigenous organizers up here. Real quick, I have a feeling the enemy such as this is going to sell out before all of you can get a copy. Just talk to Kylie, and she'll write your name down and get your address. And what David and I will do when we get back to Albuquerque is we'll sign a bunch of copies and we will mail you a signed copy if you're not able to get one tonight, okay? So we'll get your information and we'll mail those out probably within the next week. So don't fear, if you don't get a copy of the book this evening. And we also have stickers for sale for $1. I think that's it. One more person I'm going to thank is JJ. Woo! JJ Otero. Give her JJ a round of applause. JJ is going to provide like the coolest music ever. JJ is such an important comrade, actually. He's provided like the sound for the movement, like the music for the movement. You're almost like the sound of the Red Nation in a way, in the past 8 years of our existence. And we're just really honored that you're here. And JJ just, when we're like, hey, JJ, will you play some music? You always show up, even though you take care of your parents and you're just, you're committed to the movement. And we just really appreciate you being here. That said, you're going to make a pitch. We're going to pass the hat or like this bucket of Red Nation donations to give JJ some cash for his time. This is the third event you've played at. This is the third event he's played at this week for this book launch. So anything you can donate, I'm just going to pass it around. And I'm going to do another call here at the end. Here, go ahead and start.
Okay.
Go ahead and just pass it around. And I think that's, oh my God, is that it? I think that's it. Real quick, we're going to do introductions. I'm going to read a bit from the foreword that I wrote, and then David is going to go next and read a few passages from the book. And then Ursula and Erika are going to speak. And we're actually hoping to leave a significant amount of time at the end for you to speak, whether it's, Larry's relatives, people from the movement who knew Larry, or people who just want to tell a story, right, or have a comment or about the book or about the topics, that we're going to be talking about tonight. So real quick, I didn't entirely introduce myself. Co-founder of the Red Nation. I was recently an assistant professor of Native American Studies and American Studies at the University of New Mexico at Albuquerque. I'll be starting a new position in American Indian Studies at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis in the fall. So I'm kind of in between jobs. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. I'm going to pass it on to Erika to introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Erika Casuse, Larry's sister. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you guys for all being here. Very happy to see a great turnout. Nephews, I've got 3 nephews back there, and who knows, surprised me yesterday. And I'm just very happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Correia. I'm a former colleague now of Melanie Yazzie, who's left the University of New Mexico. I'm in the Department of American Studies. at the University of New Mexico, where my colleague Jennifer Donatel is my boss, actually. That's my boss. And I'm just really looking forward to this. I just want to also acknowledge some people, Leroy and Ronald, who marched in Gallup, former Kiva Club members, and Albert, who is a friend of Larry's. It's really, and I'm sure there's others, and I'm looking forward to hearing them speak after we get done with talking.
Hello, good evening. I'm Ursula Casuse Carillo. It's good to be here and to see so many people that care for Larry. He deserves everything that he's getting right now. It took 49 years, but it's been in a lot of hearts. We're just time waiting. And I agree with Erika, my sister. It's good to see my nephews. And one thing that this book is doing, one important thing it's doing is it's putting to rest that Larry killed himself, which he would never do that. He just, if you have the guts to do something like that, you sure don't. You're not gonna dishonor yourself by doing that. Or, I that's what I think anyways. I'm not want to hurt anyone if I said anything wrong. But and another thing is bringing back together, like I mentioned, my nephews. And I hope and pray that it brings our family a little bit closer together, because ever since then we've been very, very distant with each other. And God willing, that'll happen. And I feel Larry all the time. I feel him pulling and doing that. And real good to be here. Real good to see my family. My son and my daughter are here. And thank you. And my sister, thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick, do we need more chairs? Are we doing okay on chairs? Just keep tabs on it. Okay. Give me a second, let me find my passage. So part of this passage is about Gallup on something that happened on June 3rd, 2020, here in Gallup. All right. The Red Nation formed in 2014 in the border towns of the Southwest, the same geographies of violence that ignited in Larry and many others the spirit of indigenous resistance in the 1970s. We talked frequently of Larry in those days. In fact, we still do. We collaborated closely with Kiva Club, the Native student organization at the University of New Mexico Larry helped to lead 40 years earlier. When we would protest border town violence in the streets of Albuquerque and Gallup, many of us would wear Kiva Club t-shirts with Larry's face on the front. Justine's actually wearing one of the shirts right now. The back stating, quote, "The Indian movement was then born. It was born because we must once again regain the balance between good and evil," end quote. Larry said these words a little over 2 weeks before he was murdered. We knew from the beginning that the evil of which he spoke was the evil of settler colonialism, possessively and feverishly defended by settler men, the hunters, the killers of Native people, and the anti-colonial political and social orders we carry in our souls. Like Larry, we were fed up with seeing our indigenous relatives brutalized by these modern-day Indian killers. Sometimes at our protests, we would chant, "What would Larry do?" Just as often, we would be sitting around a table or a fire, plotting our next protest or event, quietly asking ourselves and each other, "What would Larry do?" It was never a rhetorical question, nor was it said in jest. It was always serious, and we already knew the answer. Of course, we knew what Larry had done. We knew what he sacrificed. And we knew we could never turn away from our people, from the flame of Native liberation that Larry and so many other ancestors in the Indian movement tended to, so that our generation, indeed all future generations, could pick up the torch and carry their prayer, their story forward. In this way, what would Larry do is the essence of the Red Nation. He lives on in each of us. He was alive on June 3rd of 2020 when a group of Native organizers from the Red Nation all of whom were women and LGBTQ2, myself included, drove into Gallup to protect Navajo women and youth participating in a Diné-led solidarity march with Black Lives Matter. Gallup's wealthy downtown business owners were literally up in arms, calling on citizens from across the region to join them in armed protection of their businesses from would-be looters. As a small march of mostly Diné youth and women passed through downtown, white and Hispano men stood at business doors like sentinels, protecting the native flesh bounty hoarded inside. Cops perched atop roofs, tracking the marchers' movements. United in their hunt, these Indian killers circled the wagons against the Indian hordes, salivating at the possibility of a good kill. While they didn't get their trophy that day, I'm sure they enjoyed their hunt. A notorious motorcycle gang casually lounged outside of Camille's Sidewalk Cafe, keeping tabs on the marchers as they held a rally in front of the courthouse a dozen yards away. The cafe's owner, himself a wealthy, influential white businessman in the region, had offered refuge and service to those helping with the armed protection of local businesses. Camille's was the temporary hunting lodge that day, where this generation of Indian killers fortified their settler masculinity by tracking Native women and youth. While this display of unadulterated hatred might seem remarkable, I want to point out that those men were afraid of our security team. They did not expect Indigenous people, let alone women, to organize protection for the marchers, to display such unadulterated love for our people that we would stand between them and their guns and the women and youth of our nations, that we would look them in the eye and show no fear. Unlike the day Larry was killed, there was no bloodshed that day, thankfully. I believe this is because we prevented it. Yes, by our presence, but more so because of the prayer we carried in our hearts, the same prayer Larry carried. We made sure Gallup knew we weren't afraid to be Indigenous in our own homelands, despite its obsessively greedy claims otherwise. And we sure as hell weren't going to tolerate any more Indian killing. I think this is what Larry would have done.
I'm going to hand it to Ursula real quick first.
I'm sorry, I forgot something. One thing, our family's always been so distant, and I don't think we knew what a family was about until we got our own families, built on our own families. And the way I found that out was I met my husband, and they taught me, well, they showed me, they didn't teach me, but they were a good example of how what a family should be. His mother kind of became my mother. And they're very good people. And a few minutes ago, I forgot to say thank you to my husband. Thank you, Nanda.
So I wanted to, I'm sorry, that was very loud. I'm so sorry. I wanted to, I'm going to read 3 passages. I've been to a few people that have been to a few of these sessions, these events, so I promise you, I'm picking 2 new passages of these 3 that I'm going to read. So there's new passages here. I wanted to, one of the reasons I met Ursula and Erika 13 years ago, and 9 years ago, and we've in one way or another been writing this book since then. And one of the reasons I wanted to write this book was to deepen the context in which we understand what Larry was struggling against and who he was fighting with and against. And I think most people, if they know anything at all about Larry, they know about the events of the last day of his life. And that's not why he's remembered. Larry's remembered as a warrior and a leader for what he committed his entire life to. And so the book is more of a biography of the entire family and the sweep of the struggle that Larry was part of and to what he committed his life to. And so the passages I want to read tonight, one gives an overview of that sort of larger context in which Larry found himself a part of, and then the 2 additional ones are 2 short passages about his parents that I wanted to read. So This is a passage that provides an overview of the whole book to give you an idea about the sort of the longer historical sweep in which Larry's struggles were part of. To follow the generations of Casuses introduced in this book is to enter their world, a world made and remade by war and occupation. The story of Larry Casuse and his family is a story of a long, unbroken line of generations that links the shootout with police in the sporting goods store in 1973 that killed Larry, to the Johnson Massacre of 1837 that killed Juan Jose Compa, another native leader killed by vigilantes or by police. The Johnson Massacre, examined in the book's third chapter, established U.S. control of the world's most profitable copper mine, where a century later Larry would be born, where his father Louis would work as a miner, and where the most radical labor union in the U.S. would organize mine workers. The story of the Casuse family links the rough streets of Gallup, where Larry would live and die, to the war-torn streets of occupied Salzburg, Austria in the 1930s and 1940s, where Larry's mom, Lillian, was born into a crumbling empire and raised in another, and where Louis would patrol as an occupation soldier during the post-war occupation of Austria. Theirs is a story that links the reservation trading posts on the Navajo Nation, an industry that sentenced generations of Navajos into debt servitude, to the company stores of the Kennecott mine in Santa Rita, where Larry was raised. The arc of the Casuse family follows the arc of U.S. colonial war and occupation. The important moments of their lives overlay like a map on the world historical events of the 19th and 20th centuries. Larry's great-great-grandfather, Jesus Arvizo, the subject of the fourth chapter, is famous and revered among Navajos. He was kidnapped from his Mexican family as a child, traded from the Apache to the Navajo as a boy, and raised among the Navajo, to whom he became a legendary leader. Larry's maternal grandfather, Richard Hutzler, fought in 2 world wars. The Royal Bavarian Army of the German Empire drafted him into the military on the same day it declared war on France in 1914. He fought as a lowly private in the wars that ended empires in Europe and was discharged from the army the day after Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated and the German Empire collapsed, and the day before the doomed Weimar Republic was declared. Larry's mother, Lillian, celebrated her 3rd birthday watching Nazis march through the streets of Salzburg, Austria, her hometown. She celebrated her 8th birthday hiding from Allied bombs that nearly destroyed Salzburg. She was almost 10 when the Soviets invaded from the north and the Americans from the west, ending the war and beginning the post-war occupation of Austria. Lillian's personal story is part of the apocalyptical story of war and occupation in mid-century Europe. War and occupation are apocalyptic for all, but more so for girls and women. Allied troops raped tens of thousands of women during the occupation. After the war, thousands more migrated to the US from war-torn Europe as war brides, including Lillian. Larry's father, Louis, fought in the 2 bloodiest European battles that American troops fought in World War II, was captured by the Wehrmacht in the Battle of the Bulge, and was held in a Nazi POW camp until his liberation. Louis rejoined the army after the war. He met Lillian in Salzburg, where he patrolled the prisoner of war and displaced persons camps during the US occupation of Austria. After he was discharged, Louis returned to New Mexico and worked in the same mine made possible by the genocidal Mexican War against the Apaches of 100 years earlier. He was one of only 2 Navajo mine workers ever to join the radical union made famous in the film Salt of the Earth, which chronicled the strike by the International Union of Mine, Mill, and Smelter Workers against Empire Zinc. No history of that union or that strike tells his story. So forget Plymouth Rock and all the other stories of American exceptionalism that celebrate colonization. Look instead at Santa Rita, New Mexico, where settler colonialism was born in the blood of Apaches murdered by American mercenaries, where it was raised by settlers in copper mines that existed only because of the bloody murder of Apaches, and where it came of age in grim and violent border towns such as Gallup, New Mexico, those horrible machines of native misery, suffering, and resistance. To understand Larry Casuse is to understand this history, so we start in Santa Rita, New Mexico, where violence against the Apaches established the conditions for windfall profits for American mining companies. And then there's Larry's father, Louis, who led a life that explodes the stereotype of Navajos as passive or helpless victims of colonial conquest. He escaped boarding school. He survived tuberculosis. He fought a world war, patrolled a European city as an occupier, brought a war bride home with him, joined the most radical labor union in the US in the 1950s. And then there's Gallup, a city calibrated to convert the suffering and misery of Navajo people into great wealth and security for settlers. And this is still true today. And this is where the Casuses would eventually move and where Larry would come of age. I wanted to read a short passage about Louis Casuse's experience in World War II. As I said, he fought in the two bloodiest battles that the US fought in Europe in World War II. I spent a couple weeks in the archives in Washington, D.C. going through the records of his unit. And what I learned was that particularly Navajo men joined or were drafted into the military at a rate higher than any other group in the United States at the time and were given almost universally the most dangerous assignments. So this passage is a passage just before he was captured by the Wehrmacht and held for 79 days as a POW. And you know, we know that what Louis rarely talked about, he very rarely talked about his experience when his kids would ask. He would say things like, you know, I do want to talk about that. The only thing he would say is, people talk about the Navajo code talkers, but I carried a gun and fought on the front lines. That's what he would say, actually. But so this is a short passage about the last couple days before he was captured. This is in the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge. Every day now was the same. Drifting snow, frigid cold, nighttime ambush patrols through the woods that lasted for hours, mortar attacks, exploding trees, casualties. An assault on January 14 sent an armored division north to take St. Vith from the Germans. The 16th Infantry took the villages of Faymonville and Chopin. Lewis's battalion cleared the railroad tracks and took the high ground near their current positions. They hiked into dense forests and down into a steep valley across a half-frozen river and then up into the German high ground. Mortars followed them as they went. They used their hand grenades to dig shallow foxholes. The next day, January 15, started warmer but grew colder when the snow and fog arrived. Division sent 150 replacement soldiers to reinforce the battalion. In the morning, Lewis's unit, quote, these are quotes from the battle reports. Lewis's unit, quote, raised itself from snowbound foxholes and launched an attack, unquote, in support of the 16th Infantry. Lewis's battalion, quote, attacked over open terrain covered with deep snow to reach a wood line where the Germans were dug in with excellent vision and fields of fire, unquote. So many men fighting on January 15 and 16, quote, would get wounded and go through the aid station, but then return to their units and then get wounded again, unquote. Lewis's unit, quote, drew considerable small arms and mortar from the draw and woods to the east of German positions, unquote. German mortar attacks pinned down I Company. L Company, quote, was caught by daylight in the open, unquote. 2 platoons were nearly wiped out by automatic weapons as artillery and mortars, quote, rained down on the men. Under cover of smoke that provided no cover, L Company retreated back to Buchenbach amid, quote, murderous machine gun fire and frightful casualties, unquote. Lewis's company attacked into the woods to the south, where they set up an observation post on the high ground overlooking Chopin, but, quote, could do little more than dig in for the night, unquote. Buchenbach must be German for misery. Wehrmacht soldiers occupied a line of bunkers along the Buchenbach Heck, a remote high elevation ridge. Lewis's water and food rations froze. Quote, the foul weather and deep snow made the supply and evacuation problem very difficult. There were only trails and they were piled high with drifted snow, unquote. Platoon commanders spent the dawn hours trying to reassemble shattered rifle companies gutted by the previous day's battle. Scores of men from Lewis's battalion had been killed, and, quote, the bodies were still lying where they'd fallen, unquote. Lewis didn't talk much about the war later in life, but he talked about the patrols on the Buchenbach Heck. Quote, they would send a few of us out on patrol at night, and I would be the only one who would return alive, unquote, he told Ursula once. It's a miracle you survived, Ursula would reply. I was a good shot, he would answer, and that was all he'd say. The sun rose to a clear and cold day on January 16. No one had slept for 3 days. What was left of Lewis's company, quote, moved forward into the woods against heavy enemy opposition and heavy concentrations of artillery fire, unquote. They linked up with a company from the 16th Infantry Regiment and moved south toward German positions. Within an hour, they found themselves in woods, quote, full of enemy and they received a heavy barrage, quote unquote, of machine gun fire, mortars, and artillery that lasted for hours. By evening, Lewis's unit was pinned down. Division sent an infantry battalion to reinforce their position. Their commanders ordered them to fight through, quote, the enemy's rear and attack from there, unquote, but there was no one left to do the fighting. Lewis's battalion had suffered hundreds of casualties over the previous few days. Nearly 200 men were wounded and 85 men were killed or missing in action. It would be here, where so many men died and would die in the remote and snowbound Buchenbach Heck, that the Wehrmacht would capture Louis Casuse. I also would like to point out that the United States military keeps reports and data and captures every fact, and they didn't record a single instance of any of the Native men fighting in those units, and there were many of them. I want to, lastly, before turning it over to Ursula and Erika, read a passage about, so Louis met Lillian when he was an occupation soldier after the war. She was a survivor of World War II. She was a child war bride, essentially, and she came back and didn't speak much English, and she was 16 when she arrived. And Louis said to her, there's no reason for you to come down to Santa Rita. All they give us is tents to live in anyways. You could just stay here in my hogan and watch the sheep up on the reservation. And she said, no, I'm coming with you to Santa Rita. So this is the moment they arrive in Santa Rita just before Larry was born. Living in Santa Rita in the 1950s, and by the way, this is a copper mine. If you've ever driven south to Silver City and you go over the Mimbres Mountains to the left, there's this enormous open pit copper mine. And so they were recruiting Navajo laborers down there because Spanish-speaking workers had been drafted, and they treated them, they segregated housing, and they made all of the Navajo laborers they recruited live in tents next to the precipitating plant. Which is like, as I said the other night, like living next to a chemical fire. Living in Santa Rita in the 1950s was like living on a sinking ship floating on a hostile copper sea. The sense of impending doom that pervaded Santa Rita during those years must have felt oddly familiar to Lillian. Nearly every day on every shift, miners with rotary drills dug 9-inch diameter, 60-foot deep blast holes. Crews poured powdered dynamite into the trenches and ignited explosions that launched rocks everywhere. The blast produced a sonic boom that thundered into Santa Rita like an Allied bombing campaign. After the explosion, the miners brought 2-story tall electric shovels online to scoop up the rubble of waste rock and ore, drawing so much electricity that lights dimmed in Santa Rita homes and as far away as Silver City. Then trucks so big that mechanics needed cranes to change flat tires rumbled in and out of the mine all day. The groan from the 25-ton diesel-powered Euclid trucks must have sounded like the roar of Panzer tanks. Louis was no longer a track man. He drove a truck instead, a much less physically taxing job, but equally as dangerous. The enormous trucks made 100 or more trips in and out of the mine each shift and ferried as much as 2,500 cubic yards of ore each day along precarious dirt roads carved out of the steeply sloped sides of the mine. Turning a fully loaded truck around required death-defying precision. Just receiving the ore from the shovels demanded a synchronized choreography that came with its own dangers. The shovels were larger than the trucks, and shovel operators were notoriously impatient. A missed connection, a truck out of place, or an irritated or careless shovel operator could flip a truck and send it tumbling down steep slopes. A truck diver named Natividad Perez suffocated to death in 1964 when a surge pile he backed his truck onto collapsed like quicksand and buried him alive. It had been these lethal working conditions, as much or more than the low wages, that fueled union organizing efforts among the mine workers in the years before Mine Mill. Before the union, runaway trains ran over trackmen, killing them or taking legs and arms. Mechanics lost eyes and fingers in shop accidents. Mill workers died of electrocution. Rock slides crushed men to death. Steam shovels flipped, killing their operators. Of all the jobs, however, the most dangerous were those of the blast crews, jobs that fell exclusively to Spanish-speaking mine workers. Powder men worked with dynamite all day long and eked out a living, risking their lives on a daily basis. They set explosions that launched boulders into the air that occasionally triggered lethal rockfalls on steep slopes. A 1954 explosion at a blast site killed 5 men, after which Kennecott abandoned hand-poured powdered dynamite and shifted instead to carbamide, a mixture of diesel fuel and dynamite, or a gelatinous mixture of ammonium nitrate and water, which they delivered by hoses attached to a powder truck. Lewis spent his workday on a truck hauling thousands of tons of ore out of the pit each shift. Lillian spent her days in their Booth Hill home, tending their vegetable garden in the morning and writing letters home in the afternoon. She'd walk to the company store to buy comic books to help her learn English. She dyed her hair dark brown and started wearing boots instead of heels. A year after arriving in New Mexico, they returned to Mexican Springs for a visit, and Lillian told everyone in her German accented English that she was 7 months pregnant. Just days before her 18th birthday, on July 19, 1953, she gave birth to a boy, Larry Wayne Casuse, in the small Santa Rita hospital. There's so many more stories in here, but I wanted to make sure we spent the rest of the time listening to Erika and Ursula.
Okay. I'm very grateful and thankful to David and Ursula, especially because when we met you back in 2013 or so, I went to a couple of memorials for Larry previous that, but I just never talked to anybody. I would just listen and then go home. So when Ursula asked you to get a hold of me, then I said it's about time because I've been hoping for a long, long time. Because when this happened to Larry, I went off the deep end. Just literally began to hate everything and everybody. And for probably 10 years, I never shed a tear. I was so angry. And then I met my husband in Sippy, and he's a Crow Indian of Salaga, and we went back to his home in Montana, and I started learning there's other cultures too. Wow. And everything, the world started opening up more. But I was still very, very angry at everybody. I was angry at the Anglos. I was angry at the Navajo. I was angry at everybody in this town because his death to me was senseless, total senseless. And how come he left me? Because I remember growing up, Larry was used to take care of us. He was my big brother, and one time we were coming back from catechism or something, and I started going down this hill, and I just kept going. That feeling just kept going, and putting faster and faster. Pretty I fell in a calyx. And he went over there, and he just wished me out, and he started taking out those stickers. Another time, some boys wanted to fight him. And he beat the crap out of these 3 boys, and I'm standing there on an anthill, red anthill. And these ants, I started yelling. He looked over at me and these ants, and he just picked me up, ran to the first neighbor's water hose, and sprayed me down. There's a lot of incidents like that. He was always looking out for the family. We were very, very close back then. My dad was always working, and my mom started working. So Larry and myself became kind of like the head of the family. And I just remember when my dad used to come home from work, we all start making tortillas and fried potatoes with onions sometimes because some people don't like onions and some people do. But anyway, and we could sit there and count beans, and that was the family thing. My dad was very much into being a Catholic and also peyote meetings. So we came a lot to the reservations and to the families and spent the night there too here. And then we go back and, school back then, the mine got so big that we moved from Santa Rita. We had to move to Baird, which is about 6 miles away. That pit became that big. If you haven't seen that pit, it's really amazing how huge it is. And I remember being in grade school, and nobody liked us. Nobody liked me. I should say us. Nobody liked me. I thought something seriously wrong with me. half the town was Anglo, and the other half was Mexican and Spanish people. And to this day, I do not know what the difference of a Mexican and a Spanish. To me, they're just, I had many, many friends throughout my life that have been Spanish or Mexican or Anglo. But I remember share this one thing because it makes me laugh. My teachers never really paid attention to me. I was just the little kid that was ignored for some reason because nobody knew who in the heck I was. Or my brothers, or we were just different there. And they asked me to ask my dad to do an Indian dance in my classroom. So I don't know, this is probably 5th or 6th grade. I was all excited. I ran home and I asked my dad, can you please come and do an Indian dance in my classroom? Because I thought I was going to get, be up, but my teacher will like me. My dad said, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to do that, I thought it would have been fantastic. That's how we lived. And Larry was very kind, and I thought he was about the main one in my family that cared about me. Whenever I had a question or help with the homework, he would be there to help me. And I'm so happy now that David made this book because what happened was so strange and whatever. Now it kind of helps us understand a little bit more of why he did this and where he came from. And just want to close with, I'm really angry and I hate racism to anybody. And I really just wanted to stop. When I started finally shedding some tears and I started realizing nothing out there means anything, I have to start working from inside somewhere. And it made me, I think, hopefully it made me a little better person, tolerant of where I am in this world. So I just pray and hope every day that everybody, in this whole entire world just starts caring a little bit more for one another. That's all I ask for. And so his kindness and hope, I hope it continues and that it's out in the open, that he was not here to hurt anybody or to get any grandiose or anything. He just really cared about people. And the past is horrible and I wish it stopped. It's still going on. But I'm really glad I've been in Gallup for a couple of years and I am just, it's nice. It's really, really nice to be back for a while, just to see the different places that I worked and went to school and stuff. So I guess that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you.
Good. That was nice. I feel a lot what you feel about Larry. Larry was a busy guy. He took care of all of us. Oh my gosh. But my story with Larry was a little bit different because when this happened, I didn't understand. I was young. I was 12 and I went out searching for him in a way. I got into a little Indian movements here and there, and I didn't understand it. And they liked me because I was a Casuse. I didn't know what was going on. And which was kind of funny. A lot of people changed their name to Casuse, and I couldn't understand that either. It was like, if you want my life, please take it.
Really?
Yeah. It was silly. I even met a girl named Najani one time. She told me she was Najani Casuse. And we got into it pretty good. So I told you you're not Najani. But it was totally silly. Yeah. But I was here in Gallup, and it kind of started, I was quiet and shy, kind of like what Erika described. And no friends, I was real shy and just kind of hid in the corner. I think that's why I have such a good memory, because I was always kind of in the corner watching everybody. And walking to school one day, they were arresting one of my friends, and we were young. I was 13, and they were probably 15. And we walked by, and the friend I was walking with, because I did have a few friends after my brother, but she goes, well, she's a Casuse, and the cop kind of noticed what she said, and before I knew it, they chased my friends away, surrounded me, went and got a lady cop, and watched us fight. And I was 13, 14 years old. And that was like the beginning of me just starting to understand what Gallup was about. And it took a while, because I ended up in jail a few times, because then I kind of got a voice, and it wasn't a very good voice. It was defending the Native American, Larry, myself, and I was angry. The anger was on top of that all. And so I always was locked up a lot. But it made me stronger, I know that. During that time, I was kind of with my little brother and sister, and it was just a hard life. But I survived it, and I'm okay. It made me what I am today. And I've learned a lot from it. I learned to not be, I think my parents were great, but I also see their faults, and I chose to not follow that. So now I'm a pretty good parent, I think. And I think they think that too, or I hope they do. But it's been a sad life, but I'm okay. And I miss Larry, and I feel Larry a lot. I feel my little sister, because that was another tragedy. After Larry died, I lost my little sister 2 years later. It still hurts. Oh my gosh. Which I've never really talked about that one. But that was a big one, because the city kind of made a deal out of that too. You know, every little piece of dirt that they could get on us, they used. I've learned something from this too. Not long ago, they put up one of these pop platters they have out on the sidewalk for Larry. And right away, someone complained, so they, instead of listening to like my side of the story or Larry's side of the story, they just destroyed it. You know, they listened to that one person. And it's still here. These Gallup people, they're the older ones kind of passed on, but the younger ones are kind of there. And so I kind of stay quiet because I live here, and I don't want it to affect my children. And it's just not, I won't let it. And I'm a pretty tough person anymore. And they did that to me. They made me tough. And once again, I'm just real grateful for David for doing this. You know, Larry deserves all this, and I'm really proud of my brother. Even though I lost him, Larry helped a lot of people. You know, I still have people, when they know who I am, they'll talk to me about Larry. And they love Larry. The ones that don't just kind of, you know, stay out of my way, which is good. You know, because I can feel it. I know they're out there. And that's all I got. And thank you. Thank you for supporting my brother.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna pass it over to you, JJ. Hey, you were supposed to open this and I forgot. I'm sorry. I didn't even let you introduce yourself. Hey. So you can play a song, 2 songs, whatever you feel like, and then we'll open it up to all of you, to the community, to speak and to share what you would like about Larry and tonight's tonight's event. But take it out. But what was I supposed to say to you?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yazzie. JJ Otero się. Kada sali szlo kiedy ci was ci. Has toy das another. Just a nair ya kini das a chi. I put in card nance. So not long before the book release, I got this call to sing a song that was written by Robert which is a song that was transcribed and it's featured at the end in the book. And luckily there was some recordings. It's really, I don't read music, but that's okay. I wasn't afraid of that. I just wanted to get an essence of what was going through Robert's mind. Apparently, Robert is your typical artist. So he was. Robert is the songwriter, and he was on Larry's couch, staying with Larry. Is from what I understand, and so, and that's kind of a very typical artist thing to do, struggling artist. I've spent many a day or a night out on the road on somebody's couch or somebody's yard in the back of my truck, or vehicle. So I really identified with Robert from that perspective, and he had very close. He was in close proximity to everything that unfolded here in Gallup. So the song he wrote, it really threw me off because it's kind of a gallop at the beginning, pun intended. So, but it had this little lilt to it, and felt like a punk song, a little bit. So, I began to start to work it out in my own way, and this is how it turned out. So I'm going to sing that song. It's an untitled song, which is apropos, which is appropriate for what the song is talking about. All right. Fred and the kid, they rode along, true to the cause, to the land they belong. The Spirit was riding with them, fear of God killed them. Ride, Fred and the dynamite kid, ride, carry us through. Ride, Fred and the dynamite kid, for the landlord's rent is overdue. The landlord's rent is overdue. The landlord's rent is overdue. To the town of corruption, they roll along, determined to change its ways. Back to true freedom it belongs, for truth, for justice, for the people and all. Ride, Fred and the dynamite kid, ride and carry us through. Ride, Fred and the dynamite kid, for the landlord's rent is overdue. The landlord's rent is overdue. town. They search for payment. Shot down before blind eyes. City justice was served. Lying on the pavement. Into the town, they search for payment. Shut down before blind eyes. City justice was served. Lying on the pavement. Blood was in the gutter. After the bullets blew out. Rye bread and the dynamite kid. Rye carry us through. Rye bread and the dynamite kid. But the landlord's rent is overdue. The landlord's rent is overdue. Sing with me. The landlord's rent is overdue. The landlord's rent is overdue. The landlord's rent is overdue. So, thank you. The outro portion where it slows down and the song is just so super powerful. Songwriters take everyday words and try to distill them so that they can tell a story. That last part just really tells a story to me when I started to work the song out. In doing that, I've written my own share of, I call it resistance rock. Mm-hmm. I've had my experiences with border towns, whether it's here in Gallup, Farmington primarily. I remember Dr. Danette Dale saying a couple of days ago she hates Farmington. I have really very much the same sentiment. Not the people, just what it does to the Indian people around. And I apologize for some of you purists who like to use, who don't like the word Indian. It's just what I grew up with, and it works well in my songwriting and in my conversations. So I abbreviate it to Indian, the letters. So this is a song I wrote about border towns, and it's from a settler perspective. So it's kind of a creepy song for me to play from time to time. Well, creepy is the wrong word. It's unsettling. It's unsettling because it really, the mindset that's behind the violence that's brought against indigenous peoples time and time again. We're tired. We're tired of it. How do those folks that propose to carry the cross of somebody that was fighting for the liberation of people and religious freedom, why do those people act this way? Welcome to my country. Let me tell you a story. How does it feel to be the brown man on the brown side of victory? Did you get my King James Bible and pray to the one who sent me? Did you get my history books? And there you know I'm the conqueror. I am the conqueror. I am the conqueror. Oh. Welcome to my border town. Come have a drink with me. 100 proof salvation from your cultural misery. While you're getting comfortable, here's your dose of brutality. My town is not your town. Just me, my money, and Jesus. My money and Jesus. My money and Jesus. My money and Jesus. Ow, ow, ow. Welcome to my military. I hear you're quite the warrior. Here's a gun and empty promises. Sacrifice for the conquerors. If you come back, there will be parades, yeah. And post-traumatic disorder. Thank you for your loyalty to manifest destiny. To manifest destiny. To manifest destiny. To manifest destiny. I would close with one more song, and I'm sorry if I'm taking quite a bit of time, but the arc of resistance has a long history, and tonight we're celebrating. Not celebrating, we're acknowledging, we're taking it in through book form, through words, through songs, through us as relatives and allies coming together and commiserating over this. We talk about ceremony, and I don't like the word ceremony because it stinks of Judeo-Christianity. But we're using English words, and even the word prayer. We don't pray. That's not what we do. We are in a communion state with each other and with other beings that are close to us, whether it's the things that crawl, whether it's the things that fly. All these animated objects are animated living things are acknowledged. So to say we're praying is just an incomplete way to say it. I'm nervous.
You're great. Thank you.
I often think about when I was a kid, you go into these beauty way things. You've got the patient here. You've got the medicine person here. You've got family around the Hogan on both sides, from the paternal side and the maternal side. I said, what an excellent therapy session to boost the immune system of that individual, that patient. So that's using an English or an Anglo way of thinking to better understand what we actually do. So you hear those songs that the medicine person sings, And you think to yourself, man, even if you live far away, I remember when I lived in California, occasionally I'd hear snippets of a song. And back then, it's very taboo to have a recorded version of any Beauty Way song. And I would hear the song and I would cry. That's how I became a singer. My Navajo people, my beautiful people, full of heart and full of strength. Not long ago, we were forced to leave our homes. Our relatives died along the way. Cried and still cry, generations of pain. Yet to this day, we still remain. The U.S. soldiers that killed my family, children, elders, and everyone in between. Washington is not our government. We will survive. We will resist. We will resist. We will resist. Oh, yeah. The elders cried. Their children heard their names. The youth is inspired. They're not afraid. They come fully armed with language and laws. Voices of strength blasting through the home. Listen, the U.S. soldiers, they killed our families, children, elders, and everyone in between. Washington is not our government. We will survive. We will resist. Oh, we will survive. We will resist. Oh, we will survive. We will resist. Oh, yeah. We will resist. Navajo Nation, we will resist. Zuni Nation, we will resist. Pueblo Nations, we will resist. Hopi Nations, we will resist. Apache Nations, we will resist. We will resist. Thank you so much.
Hey. I had to stop crying so I could talk again. Yeah. I got very I got very emotional when you were singing, just because I wasn't sad. You know, the line "We will resist." I mean, you could feel it. It was like, you know, you were saying that word like that we're praying is like an Anglo word, but you could feel it. For lack of a better word, it was a prayer. And you know, it's interesting. Like this event tonight feels a little bit different than the event we had last night in Albuquerque, and I think it's because we're in Gallup. Even your song like hit differently. Your songs tonight, there's something powerful, I think, and I just found it very moving. I think it's Larry. You know, I think Larry has been with us sometimes when we've been on front lines as the Red Nation, and it just makes me emotional because it's always, you know, Gallup wants to silence this history. Let's just be honest, right? The establishment in Gallup doesn't want this event to happen. It terrorizes the Casuse family, right? I think as Ursula was telling us. And so for our people to be able to speak the truth, for us to be ourselves, for us to shed the tears, you know, for us to acknowledge the pain, but also the beauty and the strength that we have is a really beautiful thing, and it's very moving. And so tonight I think is just very moving for me. And the music in particular, I think it hits in that way. So thank you so much, JJ. Thank you so much, David, Erika, and Ursula for speaking tonight. Oh my gosh, it's 8:00. I don't know how long we have this space, but I'd actually like to hand it over to some folks who might want to speak from the audience. You're not really the audience, you're the community. And actually, I think this book belongs to the people, and you're the people. And so I would really love to hear from any of you, if that's okay, if any of you would like to speak. And I'll just walk around with the mic and pass it to you. Just raise your hand.